Barstool Chicago recently posed a question that had a couple Chicago natives like Logan and myself thinking just a little bit. It was a Matrix-styled question: red pill or blue pill? Simply, the red pill was Cody Parkey not double doinking a field goal that would have advanced the Chicago Bears past the wild card round in the 2018 NFL playoffs. And on the other hand, it was Derrick Rose, the youngest MVP in NBA history, never getting injured. Logan, I got a very simple question for you, and I'll pose it to you this way. Which moment in Chicago sports history do you wish didn't happen?
Yeah, so fun fact, I was actually at the Double Doink game, unfortunately, up there in the high stands in the cold January day, and maybe it's part of that. That's why I'm going to go with the Bears, but I feel like it has to be the Cody Parkey making the field goal. I mean,
interesting.
If not only just for the lack of not hearing double doink in that word ever again in that phrase, because that's over and over, you hear it all day long. But looking at the Bears, looking at their defense specifically, they were one of the best defenses, not even of that year, which they were, but of the decade. PFF recently rated them as the #2 defense of the decade in WAR, behind only the 2015 Broncos, who won a Super Bowl. And I mean, you look at that alone, they were #1 in scoring defense, #1 in rush defense allowed, #1 in rush touchdowns allowed.
I remember that defense just constantly creating
#1 in interceptions, turnover margin, all that sort of stuff. So, I mean, that was an elite defense. And you look at what would have happened. They beat the Eagles that day. Yeah, they have to travel. They're on the road. They're the 3 seed, but they go to the Rams. They beat the Rams earlier that year 15-6, pretty handily, very defensive dominant game. And the Rams were the NFC representative in the Super Bowl. Obviously, you know, pass interference, the phantom PI that got called, that whole, not called, I should say, that whole thing against the Saints. But you look at that and the fact they could beat the NFC representative, getting to the Super Bowl was definitely within reach. And you look, yeah, maybe the Patriots could have handled Trubisky like they handled Goff, but it was the lowest scoring Super Bowl then with the Rams. The Bears in low-scoring games, they learned how to win those in a lot of cases that year. I really thought they would have a good chance. And as a lot of people have said, the Bulls, they've had their 6 championships. You know, the Bears haven't won since '85. The Bulls have won even more recently, even though the MJ era feels like forever ago. And Chicago, honestly, is a Bears town. When the Bears are good, Chicago feels good. And, like, the Bulls can be good and they'll have a good time, but nothing really feels the same as the Bears. So I got to go with the Bears, and I'm going to go with the Cody Parkey, just so I don't have to hear double doink ever again in my life. But that's alone.
I feel you. You made some really good points there, especially with the defense. And but you mentioned one guy that I can't vibe with you because of, and another guy who I'll mention too, where I just can't agree with you. You mentioned Mitchell Trubisky. Mitchell Trubisky won't win no Super Bowl. Clearly, point blank, period. We see where he's at now. He spent some time as a backup. Likely he'll be a starter again now in Pittsburgh this season. But also Matt Nagy. No Matt Nagy head coach football team was ever going to sniff a Super Bowl, let alone win a Super Bowl. So I get it.
Coach of the year that year, though.
Yes, he was. Yes, he was. And what has happened since, Logan? I know you know.
You got a little too creative, but
exactly. A little too big.
He was the genius at that point. Offensive genius. Offensive guru.
And Matt Nagy in a sentence. That's something that's funny. But seriously, though, I wish the double doink never happened, but there's nothing more that I wish didn't happen in Chicago sports history than Derrick Rose tearing his ACL and kind of just setting off a war path of injuries that would follow for his career. I just want to remind people, Derrick Rose was the youngest MVP in NBA history. This man averaged 25, 7, and 4 the 2010-2011 season, led the Chicago Bulls to a 62-20 record, a 60-win team whose best player was a 21-year-old, whose second and third best players were Luol Deng, Joakim Noah.
You're acting like they're nobodies, though. I mean, Joakim was a defensive.
I know. You and I know, as, again, Chicago natives who watched the Bulls growing up, we know those dudes are some players, but again, the name recognition is just not there. Those guys were never, ever superstars. Joakim Noah was the former Defensive Player of the Year. Luol Deng was one of the best scorers in the league during his prime. But still, that was not a team that you would look at and would say would win 60 games. Obviously, D. Rose led them to the conference finals that year, where they obviously lost to LeBron, D. Wade, Chris Bosh, and the Miami Heatles. And that next season, D. Rose still averaged 21 points per game, averaged more assists that season than did during his MVP season, and obviously tore his ACL that playoff run. And the Chicago Bulls have simply never recovered up until this year. This is over a decade we're talking about. The Bulls have recovered not till literally this year, led by DeMar DeRozan, Zach LaVine getting back into the playoffs. And I just want people to think about for a second, imagine rather, if this man had never gotten hurt, Derrick Rose would have continued to get better as a shooter, as a scorer. His IQ would have went up, and obviously his all-around game would have improved. And I just want to remind people as well, his teammate at one point in time was one Jimmy Butler, who we've seen in 2 of the last 3 Eastern Conference Finals. If those two were able to, kind of settle their personal differences,
that would have been interesting.
Continue to, evolve and grow together on the court. And another thing too, stars around the league would have wanted to play in Chicago for the Bulls with a superstar like Derrick Rose. I would go as far as to say that in this 10-year period, this last decade or so, if Derrick Rose had never gotten injured, the Chicago Bulls would have at least appeared in the NBA Finals. I know LeBron James still exists, but that's how lethal Derrick Rose was in his prime. And how much better he made the guys around him better too. And I think that's a part of Derrick Rose's game that kind of gets forgotten. He really made everybody around him better. He was a supreme passer, one of the most athletic dudes ever. So that's my pick, obviously.
I get it.
It still haunts me to this day. And I want to remind people too, it's not like Derrick Rose hasn't had moments since these injuries.
The shot against the Cavs.
It was going to go there. 2014, 2015 playoffs, literally a buzzer beater to beat LeBron in the Cavs. 2018, this man drops a 50 points playing for the Minnesota Timberwolves. So, this is somebody who is clearly one of the best talents ever played the game. And it's just a damn shame that injuries, specifically knee injuries, kind of derailed what could have been maybe a legendary career. I think it still is pretty damn legendary, but could have been something special. Let us know in the comments, though, which Chicago sports history, moment in history, I should say, do you wish went a little differently? The Bulls or the Bears? Let us know something. Let us know who you agree with. But for Scott Proctor, my guy Logan Hansen right here, catch you on tomorrow's episode of The Simple Question.